My brother betrayed me with my fiancée 2 months before the wedding. I found them in my bed while I was working for our future. But when my family demanded I forgive him and help her with their baby, I cut them all off and they never saw coming what I did next. I'm 30 years old, I work in financial consulting, and I need to tell this story because what happened about a year and a half ago basically destroyed everything I thought was my life, my family, my future, everything. And the truth is that until recently, I couldn't even think about this without feeling like I was going to explode. But now, I don't know. I feel like I need to get it out because I finally got to a point where I can breathe again. I guess I should start at the beginning, when everything seemed to be going exactly according to plan. I was always the responsible son, you know? The one who got good grades, the one who got a good job, the one who did things right. My brother Ethan, on the other hand, well, Ethan was a completely different story. He's 27 years old, 3 years younger than me. And since we were kids, he was always the charming one, the charismatic one, the one who could get away with everything because he had that magnetic personality that made people forgive him for everything. I was the boring one, the serious one, the one who worked too much according to my family. Ethan was the artist, the free spirit, the one who tried 1,000 different things and never finished anything, but everyone thought he was cool anyway. She was 25 at the time. I was 28. And she seemed perfect for me. She was smart, ambitious, worked in marketing for a tech company, and we shared that vision of life, of building something solid, having stability. We got engaged after a year of dating, and I was like, this is my moment. Finally, everything is working out. We planned the wedding for 2 years later because we wanted to do it right, save up, have a nice ceremony but not excessive. Everything was going perfectly until we got to 2 months before the wedding. I was working like crazy. Honestly, because they had just given me a big project at work and I wanted to impress, secure that promotion I'd been chasing, build that solid financial foundation for our marriage. I was doing overtime almost every day, leaving early, getting home late, basically a zombie who lived at the office. And Jessica was super understanding about it, or so I thought. She'd tell me, "Don't worry, honey. I understand. It's temporary. We're building our future together." Then Jessica lost her job. It was like in March last year, I think, or maybe late February. The company where she worked did massive layoffs and she was out. Obviously, she was devastated. She'd worked there like 3 years. But I told her not to worry, that we had savings, that she could take her time finding something good. I suggested she take advantage to do things she'd always wanted to do. Relax a bit before the craziness of the wedding and all that. And this is where everything starts to go to shit, though I didn't know it yet. Jessica decided to enroll in a pottery class. Yeah, pottery. Like making vases and ceramics and all that artistic vibe. I thought it was fine. Honestly, I thought it was nice that she had a hobby, something to keep her busy while looking for work. What I didn't know, and this kills me to this day, is that Ethan was also taking that class. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, but I was so into my work, so focused on securing our financial future, that I didn't pay attention. Ethan started showing up at our house all the time. And when I say all the time, I mean literally every day. He'd come like in the afternoon, when I was still at the office, and stay for hours. Jessica would tell me it was because they were working on a pottery project together, that Ethan was helping her improve her technique, that it was super fun to have that creative connection. I thought, well, it's good they get along, right? Because the truth is, Jessica and Ethan had never been particularly close before. Jessica had always been kind of critical of Ethan's lifestyle. Said he was too irresponsible, that he needed to grow up. But suddenly they were spending all this time together, and she only talked about how talented he was, how creative, how different. And I, like an idiot, thought, how nice that finally my fiancé and my brother are becoming friends. The bomb exploded on a Tuesday. A damn Tuesday in April that should have been a normal day but ended up being the day that changed absolutely everything. I had a business trip planned for that week. I was supposed to be away 3 days. But it turns out the main meeting got canceled the first day because the client had a family emergency. So I decided to come home early. I thought it would be a nice surprise for Jessica. We could have an evening together since I'd been so absent lately. I got to the house around 2 in the afternoon. Ethan's car was parked outside, which didn't seem strange to me because, lately it was always there. I went in through the front door, went up the stairs because the house was weird, quiet, and when I opened the door to our bedroom, to the bedroom I shared with my fiancé, I found them there, Jessica and Ethan, in my bed, together. I can't even describe what I felt in that moment. It was like my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing, Like, this can't be happening. This has to be a nightmare. I'm going to wake up in a minute. But I didn't wake up. Jessica screamed. Ethan jumped out of bed trying to put his pants on, and I just stood there with my suitcase still in my hand like a complete idiot. And then the rage came. A rage I'd never felt in my life, that I didn't even know I was capable of feeling. I lunged at Ethan, punched him straight in the face, and felt his nose crack under my fist. There was blood everywhere. He was screaming. Jessica was screaming. And I just kept hitting him until Jessica literally threw herself on me to stop me. I broke his nose. I found out later, and honestly, at that moment I didn't care at all. I yelled at them to get out of my house. Jessica tried to talk to me, say I don't know what, but I didn't want to hear anything. I threw her clothes at her, told her she had 10 minutes to get her stuff out or I was going to throw it all in the street. Ethan had already run off with his face covered in blood, basically fled the house. Jessica stayed there crying, saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But her words meant nothing to me. They were just noise. When they finally left, I sat on the living room floor, and I think I was there like 2 hours without moving, just staring at the wall. I couldn't cry. I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything. It was like my whole life had been a lie, and I didn't know what part of me was real anymore. That night, I called my parents. I needed to tell them before Ethan told them his version, because I knew he was going to run to them. My mother, Maria, answered the phone. I told her what happened, told her I'd found Ethan and Jessica in bed, that I'd broken Ethan's nose, that the engagement was obviously canceled. And you know what was the first thing she said to me? It wasn't, oh son, I'm so sorry, or I can't believe Ethan did that. No, the first thing she said was, you hit your brother? Samuel, how could you do that to your brother? He's bleeding. He had to go to the hospital. I went quiet because I literally couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, Mom, did you hear the part where I said I found them together in my bed 2 months before my wedding? And she responded something like, well, yes, that's wrong. But violence is never the answer. Ethan is your brother. Family is the most important thing. That's when I realized something I probably should have seen years ago. My mother was always going to defend Ethan no matter what. He was her favorite. He always had been. He could do anything, destroy anything, hurt anyone, and she was going to find a way to excuse it, minimize it, make it seem like it wasn't that serious. My father, Joseph, got on the phone after. He was more understanding, at least at first. He told me he understood my reaction, that anyone would have done the same, that what Ethan and Jessica did was unforgivable. But then he added, but he's still your brother, Samuel. Eventually you're going to have to forgive him. Family is family. I hung up the phone. I had nothing more to say to them. The next few days were absolute hell. I had to cancel the wedding, notify all the guests, deal with the deposits we lost, return gifts. Every call, every email, every conversation was remembering the humiliation, the betrayal. People asked me what happened and I didn't know what to say. Do I tell them the truth? Do I lie? In the end, I'd end up saying something vague like, we decided it wasn't the right time, but everyone knew something had happened. I blocked Jessica on everything. Phone number, social media, email, everything. I didn't want to know anything about her. Never again in my life. Ethan. I tried to call me like 50 times, but I didn't answer him either. What was he going to tell me? I'm sorry? It was a mistake? Nothing he could say was going to change what he did. Like 2 weeks after the incident, Ethan sent me a text message saying we needed to talk, that it was important, that please we should meet. I didn't want to, obviously, but something in the message made me think there was more drama coming. So I agreed to meet him at a neutral cafe, a public place where I couldn't lose control again. I got to the cafe, and there they both were, Ethan and Jessica, together. He still had a swollen nose, bruises around his eyes, and looked nervous like I'd never seen him. Jessica was pale, almost green, kept touching her stomach. They sat in front of me, and there was a horrible, awkward silence until Ethan finally spoke. He told me, "Look, Samuel, I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you, but you need to know that Jessica and I are together now. For real. It wasn't just something physical. We fell in love." And then Jessica added, looking me straight in the eyes with that guilty but also kind of defiant face, "I'm pregnant. Samuel, 3 months. It's Ethan's. 3 months. They'd been sleeping together for at least 3 months, probably more. All that time, I was working to secure our future, to pay for the wedding, to build a life together. She was with my brother. And now she was pregnant with his child. I don't know how I didn't have a heart attack right there. I told them something like, 'Okay, thanks for the information. I don't know what you expect me to say. Congratulations, I guess,' and I got up to leave. Jessica tried to grab my arm, say something about how this was difficult for everyone, and I just looked at her and said, 'Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again in your life.' But it didn't end there, because my family decided I was the problem. My mother started calling me constantly, leaving me voicemails about how I had to forgive, how Ethan and Jessica really loved each other, how I was going to have a niece or nephew, how family was the most important thing, and I was being selfish for not being able to get over it. Like, selfish me? Seriously? One day my mother showed up at my house without warning. I let her in because, I don't know, I still had that programming to respect parents despite everything. She sat in my living room and gave me a whole sermon about forgiveness, about how Ethan was suffering from my rejection, about how Jessica was stressed about the pregnancy and my attitude wasn't helping, about how I needed to be the bigger person and forgive because I was the older brother, the mature one, the responsible one. I asked her, "Are you ever going to acknowledge that what he did was wrong? That what he did to me was one of the worst possible betrayals?" And she responded, "Well, yes, it was a mistake, but love is complicated, these things happen, and holding a grudge is only going to hurt you." That's when I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in that city, near that family, breathing the same air as all that toxicity. I needed to leave, start over, build a life completely separate from all this. So I started looking for jobs in other cities, places where nobody knew me, where I wouldn't have to see familiar faces that reminded me all the time of what happened. About a month later, I found a perfect opportunity, a senior position in my company, but at the office in another city, like 6 hours from where I lived. It was a promotion, better salary, better everything, and it also got me out of that hell. I accepted without thinking twice. I told my mother I was leaving. She got hysterical, saying I was being dramatic, that I was running from my problems, that family needed to stay together, especially now that the baby was going to be born. I told her it wasn't my baby, it wasn't my problem, and that I needed distance from all of them. My father tried to be more understanding, said he. Understood. I needed space, but also made it clear he thought I should eventually come back and fix things with Ethan. I moved in August. I packed my things, sold some furniture, put others in storage, and left. I didn't tell Jessica or Ethan I was leaving, only told my parents. I blocked my mother on the phone too, because she kept sending me manipulative messages about my family responsibilities. The new city was perfect. Nobody knew me. Nobody knew my story. I could just be Samuel, the guy who works in consulting, not Samuel, the idiot whose brother slept with his fiancée. I started going to the gym, going out with coworkers, rebuilding some kind of social life. I wasn't ready to date anyone romantically, obviously, but at least I was functioning as a human being again. Work was going amazing. They gave me the promotion they'd promised me. I started leading big projects. My boss loved me. It was like all that energy I used to put into maintaining my relationship and trying to please my family, I was now channeling into my career, and the results were evident. For the first time in months, I felt good, or at least something close to good. About a year passed. A year where I had practically no contact with anyone from my family except occasional messages with my father, who updated me on things but without pressuring me. I found out from him that Jessica had had a girl, that they named her Penelope, that she was beautiful according to everyone. I felt nothing when he told me. Honestly, it was like he was talking about complete strangers. And then, on a Sunday in July, everything exploded again. I was in my apartment, relaxed, watching a series, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Obviously, I didn't have many friends yet in the city who would show up unannounced. I opened the door and there was Jessica. She had a baby in her arms. Clearly it was Penelope, though I'd never seen her before. Jessica looked horrible. Honestly, like she hadn't slept in weeks, with deep dark circles, messy hair, clothes that looked like she'd worn for days. The baby was crying. I stood there not knowing what to say. Jessica started talking fast, like hysterical, saying she needed help, that Ethan had left them, that she had no money, that she was living in her car with Penelope, that she had no one else to turn to. I asked her, "How did you find my address?" And she admitted she'd begged my father until he gave it to her, thinking maybe I'd help if I saw the situation. I told her, "Jessica, why did you think I would help you after everything? Why did you think it was appropriate to show up here?" And she started crying, saying she was so sorry, that it had been the worst mistake of her life, that Ethan turned out to be exactly the kind of irresponsible person she always thought he was, that he'd left her when the baby was barely 2 months old because he couldn't handle the responsibility, that she didn't know what to do. A part of me, a very small and probably stupid part, felt some pity. Not for Jessica, but for the baby, who wasn't to blame for any of this. But the bigger part, the part that still remembered finding them in my bed, that remembered all the lies, that remembered the humiliation of canceling my wedding, that part felt nothing except exhaustion. I told her I couldn't help her, that she needed to leave. Jessica completely broke down, begging, saying please. She just needed a place to stay for a few days, just until she could figure something out. I told her no, that she'd crossed a line by coming here, that she needed to contact her own family, not me. I was closing the door when I heard another car parking. It was my mother. Of course it was my mother. Apparently Jessica had told her she was coming here, and my mother decided to make the 6-hour trip to make sure I did the right thing. Maria got out of the car with that look of determination I know so well. That expression that means she's coming to tell me what to do and won't accept no for an answer. She walked straight toward me, didn't even greet me, just said, "Samuel, you need to help Jessica and your niece. They're family." I told her, "No, they're not my family. They stopped being so a year ago when they decided to destroy my life." And my mother responded with all that rhetoric about blood being more important than anything, about how Penelope was innocent, about how it was my responsibility as an uncle to help. That's when I realized something. My mother was never going to change. She was never going to admit that Ethan had done something unforgivable. She was never going to prioritize my feelings over keeping family peace, which basically meant I had to swallow everything and pretend nothing had happened. She was literally here, at my door, 6 hours away from her home, demanding I help the woman who betrayed me, in the worst possible way. I told them both to leave. My mother started yelling, which she almost never does, saying I was selfish, that I was abandoning my family in their time of need, that I was going to regret this. Jessica just cried with the baby in her arms, which made me feel like garbage, but also like, what am I supposed to do? I closed the door. I literally left them outside and closed the door. I could hear my mother pounding, yelling, but I stayed inside. Eventually they left. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the baby, about Penelope, who again wasn't to blame for anything. I felt like a monster, but I also knew that if I helped, if I let them into my life, I was never going to be able to close that chapter. I was going to be tied to Jessica, to Ethan, to all that pain forever. And the next day, Jessica sent me a message from a new number I didn't have blocked, begging once more. I sent her money, like $2,000 or something, enough for her to rent something for a month and eat. I told her it was the only thing I was going to do. That after this I didn't want to hear from her again. She thanked me, promised she'd pay me back, that she was going to fix her life. I blocked that number too, I blocked my mother on everything again. I blocked my father too because I knew she was going to use him to contact me. I cut off all contact with all of them. And honestly, I felt relieved. It was like taking a huge weight off my shoulders. But there was still one thing that bothered me. I needed to know what had happened with Ethan, where he was, why he'd abandoned his daughter. So I did something probably kind of obsessive. I hired a private investigator to find him. Yeah, I spent money on that, but I needed to know. It turned out Ethan was living in a city like 2 hours from where my parents lived, with a new woman. The investigator sent me photos and everything. Ethan looked happy, carefree, like he didn't have a 1-year-old daughter who was practically homeless with her mother. He was living his best life, while Jessica and Penelope suffered the loathsome consequences of his actions. I took a day off work and drove to where he lived. I knocked on the door of his house on a Saturday morning. The woman he was living with opened it, looked confused. I told her I was Ethan's brother and I needed to talk to him. She called Ethan, and when he appeared at the door and saw me, his face turned white. I told him we needed to talk outside. The girlfriend or whatever stayed inside but was clearly listening. I told Ethan, "Do you know Jessica is basically on the street with your daughter? Do you know your daughter doesn't have a stable home because you decided to run from your responsibilities?" And he started with excuses, that Jessica was too demanding, that he couldn't handle the stress, that he needed space to find himself, or I don't know what shit. I told him, "I don't care about your excuses. You're going to start sending money to Jessica for Penelope. You're going to be a father at least financially if you can't be one in any other way, because that baby didn't ask to be born and doesn't deserve to suffer because you're a coward." Ethan got defensive, saying I couldn't tell him what to do, that it wasn't my problem. I told him, "You're right. It's not my problem. None of this is my problem. But I also can't live knowing there's a baby suffering, and I did nothing when I could. Not for Jessica. I don't give a damn about Jessica. But Penelope isn't to blame for having such a useless father and a mother who made the worst decisions of her life. I don't know if my words had any impact. Ethan looked ashamed at least, but who knows. I gave him the address where Jessica was living, thanks to the money I sent her, and I left. It wasn't my responsibility to make sure he did anything. I just needed to say it to his face. That was like 3 months ago. Since then, I've had zero contact with any of them. I don't know what happened with Jessica and Penelope. I hope they're okay, but it's not something I can carry anymore. I don't know if Ethan did anything or not. Probably not. My parents keep trying to contact me occasionally from unknown numbers, but I don't even answer calls I don't recognize anymore. The truth is, my life now is good. Peaceful. They promoted me again a month ago. I'm seeing someone casually, though it's nothing serious yet. I have friends who don't know anything about all this drama. I go to therapy once a week, because after all this, I realized I needed to process a bunch of shit from my childhood too. Not just the betrayal, but the whole family dynamic that allowed something like this to happen. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. You know, if I should have helped more. If I was too harsh. But then I remember finding them in my bed. I remember my mother defending the indefensible. I remember all the times I was expected to be the bigger person, the mature one, the one who sacrificed my happiness to keep family peace. And I realized that establishing those boundaries, cutting that contact, leaving, and building a new life was probably the healthiest thing I've done in my life. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive. Honestly, I don't know if I want to forgive. Forgiveness feels like something people expect from you, so they feel better, not for you to truly heal. I'm healing in my own way, in my own time, and that doesn't include pretending what happened was okay, or that I can have a relationship with people who hurt me so deeply and never showed real remorse. Last week, a coworker asked me if I had siblings. I told him no, and I didn't feel bad saying it, because the truth is Ethan stopped being my brother the day he decided to betray me that way. Family isn't just blood, it's respect, it's loyalty, it's love, and I don't have any of that with them, and that's okay. I'm okay. Finally, after all this, I'm okay.